So, good evening, members. Welcome to the meeting. I'd like to commence as it's gone 15:15. Sorry?
Councillor Schweer's just coming into the chamber.
No, right. We'll just wait for Councillor Schweer, who's arriving as we speak.
Councillor Schweer, you're welcome to move over to the side if you want a bit more space.
Very crowded over there. Okay, item 1, do we have any apologies for absence? Yes, we do. We have Councillor Cardle, Councillor
Councillor
Raymond, and Councillor
Chairman, we are aware that we
Hicks.
have that Councillor Hicks may have been given his apologies for this evening, but in governance we've not received those formally. However, if you'd like to record his apologies for this evening, you're welcome to do so, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, I think it is.
Councillor Hicks.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Hicks did give his apologies to me, so I'll pass those on now. Okay, we go to item 2. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to the items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members and having taken appropriate advice? No? None. We have the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been published, and I presume everyone has received. Are there any issues with that at all? No? Does everyone agree the minutes? Would you like to? We have Councillor Mrs. Beavis. Do I propose those? Anyone second? Yep. Councillor. Right. All those in favour? Okay. We move on to public question time. There is no member of the public present, so we go straight on to
Chairman, before
item 4. We did agree to
yes, Chairman.
do item 6 first.
Yes, Chairman. We, because of the nature of the item, we requested to bring forward item 6 to be taken immediately after public question time. So, Chairman, with your permission and the committee's agreement, we prefer to do that now. If we may, please.
Okay, we have one Hackney carriage proprietor's licence to be allocated. Would you like to do that via the magic process?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Before we draw the ballot by using the online calculator, the report is set out on page 5 onwards. Sorry, that's a misdirection. I do apologise for that, members. The report for this is on page 56 to 59 of the agenda. Members, as you are aware, we have, whilst we were at virtual meetings, we introduced calling the ballot by using an online calculator, which we believe was quite welcomed by the trade because it meant that they can see how the number is generated in a more transparent way. The report has been put together by John Meddings, who's with us this evening. Chairman, before we actually move to drawing the ballot, could I invite John to advise members if there's anything that they need to be advised of before we proceed? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As already detailed, we had a plate returned to us in accordance with the Hackney Carriage Proprietor allocation policy, we needed to reissue that, and we do that in accordance with the policy through a random ballot, which is taking place tonight. As part of that policy, it stipulates that all licensed drivers and private hire operators are consulted and given the opportunity to express an interest to obtain this licence. We run such a consultation over a 4-week period from the 7th of June to the 1st of July 2022, and as a result of that, we received 17 responses, and they are listed before you in your bundles. The numbers are 1 to 17 are associated to an individual expression of interest as detailed in your bundle, and as Mrs. Wisby has already outlined, we have established a way of conducting this ballot through a number generator system that worked very successfully when we previously used it. So therefore, that's all I have to say, unless any members have any questions. Thank you.
Shall we proceed with the...
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
So, Chairman, I will now share my screen. So you will be able to see on the screens in the chamber, and this is what the public can see on the YouTube broadcast. So this is, as the town report, calculate.net. This is an online generator. This has no affiliations with Braintree District Council. We selected this application because it's the one that we've used previously and tested. So just so members can see how this operates, and any member of the public or interest parties can see how this works, I will just do a quick demonstration. I won't use numbers 1 to 17 as part of the demonstration, so I will put in 50 to 100, and as you can see on the screen, I've completed those fields, and then by selecting the button Generate, it then gives you a number which I've highlighted in blue, which you can see is the number 94. And if I just press that again, you can see it generates another number. So members, are you happy that the generator works satisfactorily and are happy for me to proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. So as highlighted in the report, we have entries 1 to 17. So this is now generating the number for the first number to be selected out of the ballot, and this will be the applicant who's successful. So the number that has been generated is number 9. So on page 57 of the agenda, number 9 is Burkan A. So Chairman and members, that is the successful applicant on the ballot. We do set out that there is a reserve. So I'm just going to clear the fields just so we can just do another generation, and I will now call for the reserve. So I'll put 1 to 17 in the generator. Now if number 9 comes up again, I will proceed to a second generated number. So this time number 4 is the reserve plate, and that's Tarek Alouda. Lauda, I do apologise. So, Chairman, we have pulled the successful plate allocation to number 9, and should number 9 not be able to take up the plate in accordance with the Council's policy, the plate will be offered to number 4. So, Chairman, that concludes the ballot for this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to item number 5, which is the Statement of Licensing Policy for Sex Establishments, revised 2022. You'll find that on pages 5 to 55. In the introduction, it explains what basically the areas which have been changed. John, would you like to introduce them?
Thank you, Chairman. As you can see before you, this is a review at the very first stage of the sex establishment policy for Braintree District Council. It's due a refresher. There isn't any specific change in legislation. It's just good practice to obviously review our policies over the course of time. The changes that I've highlighted in the report are generally, there's no deviation from the general stance of the policy. It's just adding additional, what would be considered good practice entries to the policy regarding how we seek to look at how our policy reflects on applications and how applicants or potential applicants should read our policy in line with other policies. I have detailed all the amendments and they are before you. The next step would be to go to a public consultation. That's detailed further in the report. So a number of key stakeholders, the obvious responsible authorities that we're used to dealing with are also consultees in this, but also further afield, as in community organisations that could be affected, you as councillors, education establishments. So what we're seeking today is to a proposal that this draft policy goes forward to public consultation. As I've said, the amendments that have been made aren't a deviation in any policy from previous drafts. So it's a case of if any members have got any specific questions regarding the policy in general, before it goes out to public consultation, this is the time, obviously, to highlight that so I can potentially introduce it if needed. Okay.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? None at all? Oh, Councillor Square.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is one of the occasions where I think we have to have pretty good trust in our excellent officer for this, because obviously he's had the opportunity to look at this in far greater detail than probably what's in the report tonight. And the fact that this is actually then only, the recommendation is only going out to consultation, I am quite happy to move the recommendation as set out in 2 and 2.1 for the committee.
Councillor Mrs. Beavis. Seconded.
Chairman, if I just may just point out to members in paragraph 5.5 of the officer's report on page 7, it does remind members that any representations that are received during the consultation period will be considered and brought before the committee before the final policy is approved. It is the power of this committee to approve through that policy on behalf of the district council. So depending on what the consultations bring back, you may find that there is new matters introduced to the policy. If we are in that provision, then officers will take you through that. But as Councillor correctly points out, this is the start of the consultation and not the formal adoption. That will come much later in the year. Thank you.
Yes, I just had one question. I mean, we've had this with a couple of policies recently. Is there anything coming through or in the pipeline in government regarding, guidance or anything at all?
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I suppose, depending on how you look at it, there's no plans for any changes in the legislation from government or on guidance. Well, there isn't really guidance been issued, either statutory or just general guidance. It's a case of it's a field that local authorities are generally and deliberately so left to determine their own policies and procedures on how they progress with these applications. We are in a fairly unique position in the fact that we only have the single sex establishment in our district at the moment. That doesn't mean we can obviously just stop looking at these policies when they need refreshing. But a short answer to the question is no, there isn't any.
Fair enough. Okay, shall we take a vote on that then, please? All those in favour? It's unanimous, Mike. That concludes that. We go on to item 7, which is licensing committee update, pages 60 to 68. John would like to present this.
Thank you, Chairman. The update report goes into a great detail. I appreciate a lot of members that were involved in the specific applications. Now, where it goes into great detail about, or it goes into detail about applications, I don't particularly, unless members want me to, go into detail about what specifically happened, because it's all before you in the bundle. But there are lots of points here that require some explanation. The first is 3.7. Due post-COVID, there's now a dramatic increase in the number of licences we are processing as a team, not just compared to during COVID, as you'd expect a significant reduction in applications then, but even pre-COVID, we're now at application levels that we've not experienced before. We're at one of the highest levels. So a lot of that may be due to new entrants to the licensing field as such, with new premises as open once they've closed. But we, as a team, are processing considerable numbers of applications currently, and only a small proportion obviously come to you as members to be determined. As you're all aware, I imagine, the Gambling Act policy statement has gone through its consultation and approval, and now it's at the publication stage. So it's now, I think it's the end of this week is the 4th week. So on the 1st of August, the new Gambling Act policy statement will come into effect, and you'll obviously make reference to that in decisions regarding gambling application. You'll also be aware of that there's been an increase in the fares for our Hackney carriages in the district. That has proceeded well. On the introduction date, a significant number of our Hackney carriages all had their tariffs amended at Causeway House due to the increased capacity we've had with the car park not being used. That was very successful. It enabled us to monitor which vehicles had updated their meters in accordance with the new fare, and obviously to chase up the ones that hadn't. So that was very successful, and if we have the opportunity to do that in the future, we will hopefully continue that. But as a note that hasn't made it into the report, whether it's not really a good or a bad thing, it's difficult to determine, but the Hackney Carriage Trade are already discussing putting in another fare increase to what they consider are extreme economic factors affecting their industry. I am not sure when I'm currently dealing with a number of individuals that have given a suggestion that they will trigger the fare increase themselves, but I've tried to get them to coordinate collectively as a large group rather than deal with individuals. There was, because of the process for a fare increase, there is a suggestion that they may wait till the end of the year and then put an additional fare increase once they've had this for a period of time to see what the effects would be and the fuel prices stabilising, and then ultimately they would look at a fare increase then coming in for April, if it obviously was approved by the process for the fare increases. So it's a case of it's unheard of historically that we would do back-to-back fare increases, but these are the times we live in, and that may be something we need to be aware of for the future. The next part is that the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicles Safeguarding and Road Safety Act was introduced on the 31st of March, and basically the purpose of that is to introduce a national database to local authorities, so that when applications are received, we can check this database to see if other local authorities have taken action against that applicant. And this is to stop us, or to ensure we've got all the information available to us when we make our decisions to grant or refuse licences. That obviously means that any decisions we make to refuse a licence or revoke a licence will be uploaded onto this database. We currently aren't operating this database at the moment, but we are working with the other teams are in the local authority to ensure that all our policies and procedures are updated before introducing. So it's not currently law that we do this, but we're trying to get ahead of the game before the government do make it a legal requirement to operate this database. And from it's just a sensible solution to dealing with an issue of one local authority refusing a licence and then potentially getting granted in a different neighbouring authority or one end to the other of the country.
John, can I just adding on to the
Sure.
The National Register, John's already made reference working with other officers of the organisation. Because at the moment this register, it doesn't have the basis in law, we are having to work with the government service to make sure that our processing of data is lawful. That's what each authority has to undertake. But what will appear on the register will not be probably the information that people might expect. It's a means to make inquiries of other local authorities. So historically, we have become aware of intelligence from working with other colleagues, where this gives us a central database to make our own inquiries. But what the database will simply say is that, let's say, Mr. A. Jones had a licence revoked by Braintree District Council. That's in essence what the register will say. The authority who's made that inquiry will then still need to contact the local authority to get the data behind that entry. So it's not a database where everybody's history is put out there on a public register. So there is safeguards in place. So this is why it's taken quite a lot of time to complete, because while we have been encouraged centrally to progress this register, we still have to go through the appropriate data protection legislation safeguarding to make sure that the use of this register is lawful, and that we have got all the provisions in place, because it's not a case of just starting the database. We have to give a certain amount of notice. We have to change a lot of our processes to make reference that decisions made with respect to these applications will automatically be included on the database. So there's a lot of work in the background. It's not just a case of setting up the register and start uploading it. It's produced a lot more work than we initially considered, but we do have to make sure that it's all done appropriately, and hopefully we are not too far away from having it uploaded, and it will be a part of the tool that we use to assess applications for the fit and proper person test, which is the fundamental test when looking at granting or maintaining licences that have been granted by the authority. It cannot be used for any other purpose. Thank you, John.
Sorry, unfortunately, I've worked. Yep.
Yes, in 511, it says although we're compliant with the requirements, your authority intends to go further by adding a further section which provides a driver operator with the information as to what type of wheelchair can be conveyed. The updated list will be available in due course. Do you know what's the timescale on that, Tom? Writing that to say?
Sorry, yeah, that was my next point after the NR3. So this may answer your question, but earlier at the end of last month, the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicles Disabled Person Act took effect. And what that requires the local authority to do is publish a list of all their licensed wheelchair accessible vehicles. Unhelpfully, for everybody on this, that unfortunately the list only required specific details, and one of them wasn't the contact details of the people that can provide that wheelchair accessible vehicle, which made, unfortunately, the list fairly meaningless from trying to assist members of the community to access wheelchair accessible vehicles. So what we've done in addition to this, and it's on a completely voluntary basis, and we had to write to all of the people involved, is that we as well as publishing this list, there would be an additional section that gave the opportunity for the proprietor of that vehicle to include their contact details when they were available, when the wheelchair accessible vehicle would be available, making the list a lot more functional. The problem is it's voluntary, so the proprietors have the right to just leave their details as they are. And obviously, once it's been completely compiled, it will then be published and available on our website. And we are actively encouraging people to add their additional details onto the list to make it a lot more user-friendly and functional.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Thank you, John.
We are now back to conducting face-to-face pub watches with the trade in Braintree, Witham and Housestead. So they're meetings for our officers, the police and the publicans in the area to discuss issues regarding that. It's a general, it can be unfortunately a very negative forum, but it gives us an opportunity to obviously see what the concerns are from the local industry jointly with the police and how we can assist where we can. We had additional officers over the Jubilee weekend, and we were able to deal with any inquiries from the police or other agencies regarding the licensing situation of certain events. As you can imagine, it was a fairly light touch affair, and generally people were either fully compliant or fell outside of the licensing regime. Members, I do apologise if I do skip anything that you do have questions on or wish to ask. Please feel free to do so. We, as always, are conducting proactive checks on licensed premises, as well as our Hackney and private hire vehicles. We've recently been out with the police, and we now have a programme, with an annual programme with the police, to do alternate visits between our licensed vehicle trade and inspections on their vehicles and drivers, and then we alternate with doing our licensed premises. And they've been very successful, and there's lots of good feedback from the officers that attend from Braintree District Council as well as from the police. So we will continue with those as long as the police are able to commit the resources, hopefully. It's not made it to a report, but I will just mention it is a recent change. The government has backtracked on its decision to continue. Originally, anyone that didn't have off sales on their licence were granted until September 2022 the ability to have off sales due to the measures that were introduced in the COVID situation. They were due to come to the end on the September of this year. The government has now changed its mind, maybe potentially through lobbying, and increased that till 2023 now. So although that may not seem a big issue, I think it would have been for a lot of businesses that have changed how they operate during COVID, and that now they have that extra year to get their licences and provisions in place for 2023. That was very much a whistle-stop tour. Like I said, if members have specific questions on any specific points in that report, I'm obviously happy to answer them as best I can. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mr. Beavis.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of observations, if I may, and then I have a quick question as well. I think, first of all, John keeps saying to us that he's skipping through parts of the report this evening, and one is mindful in the quality of reports we actually get from John. I mean, they're so concise and precise, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think in John we have a first-class officer, and I'm also very mindful that we delegate as well. You know, we don't have everything that comes in front of us, so there is a degree of delegation. The question I wanted to ask was around capacity of John's department, and I know I've asked about this before, because we've seen this evening and demonstrated through the reports that, you know, the workload is heavy, and I know that it can sort of be self-funding, and we can look to increase capacity in any case. But I'm just mindful that when I was working on the Rotherham case for the LGA, and I need to declare an interest in the LGA, that everything is good until it goes wrong. And, you know, I just think that if you ever feel you need to increase that capacity, John, don't be frightened to put it to us and do so, really, is my comment straight question. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. But just on that, luckily here, specifically at Braintree Council, we have very supportive senior management, and because of the nature of licensing being self-funded, generally speaking, increased applications obviously lead to increased revenue, and therefore that capacity is normally, once we know it isn't a short-term increase, we do have additional resources already that we're losing shortly, but that's constantly being assessed and constantly being reviewed. And yeah, it's something that, yeah, when it's been requested, I have to admit, from an officer's perspective, we are very lucky in the fact that we do get quick decisions, and we can turn around the resources that we need for the team very quickly. So no, thank you very much.
Thank you. Notice we have a gentleman just arrived. I presume you're a driver, and you've come to perhaps hear the result of the allocation of a proprietor's licence. Mrs. Bisbee would like to announce that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, this item was taken earlier on in the meeting, and the gentleman and anybody who has an interest can watch the YouTube channel broadcast of this meeting afterwards. But I can confirm for the gentleman who is now present that the draw was taken, and sorry, Chairman, I'm just misplaced my placement in my document. So the first draw who be allocated, but it was number 9, Mr. Burkan L, and number 4 was the reserve, so Terry Laluda. So, Chairman, they are the matters that were drawn earlier in the meeting and can be watched on the YouTube broadcast, which is at the moment a live simultaneous broadcast, but it can be seen from the library on the YouTube channel under Braintree District Council. It will also be minuted in the minutes for this meeting, and they will also be published on the Council's website within 5 working days of the date of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bisbee. We now come to item 8, urgent business in public session, and I believe we have no urgent business. We'll also exclude the public and press in preparation for private session. The only thing we have in private session is the training session.
Chairman, we don't actually have any business for private session.
No,
the training session is separate to this meeting. So, Chairman, could I invite you to close this meeting at 7:50, And then we need to just then terminate this broadcast at the conclusion of this meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, close the meeting at 7:50.